And I now call upon Vice Chief Kimberly Jonathan from the Federation of Saskatchewan Indians. Please, you have the floor.
Good morning, respected delegates, nations, leaders, and peoples. I am thankful for the opportunity to be standing here to speak on issues that are very near to my heart and that of many nations in the state of Canada. I come here before you all not only as the first Vice Chief of the Federation of Saskatchewan Indian Nations, an umbrella organization for First Nations chiefs that represents 74 First Nations with an Indigenous population of over 145,000, but I also come before you as an Indigenous mother, protector, and nurturer. I am sure everyone in this room knows that children are our greatest joy and greatest blessing. They are our future given to us from Creator and our responsibility to ensure a better tomorrow. It breaks my heart and that of our grandmothers that in a country that enjoys great wealth and high average standard of living built on natural resources taken from our peoples, that in my home territory, 2 out of 3 Indigenous children are living in poverty. That Indigenous people in my territory comprise 15% of the population, yet over 80% of the children taken from their mothers and fathers into child welfare system are Indigenous children. And that an Indigenous child in my territory has better odds of encountering the justice system than achieving a higher education. Or that an Indigenous child is more likely than a non-Indigenous child to take their own life in despair. In Canada, Indigenous children trail all other children on practically every measure of well-being, including family income, educational attainment, water quality, infant mortality, health, suicide, crowding, and homelessness. Researchers warn that in the socioeconomic status of Indigenous children will continue to rise each year as the Indigenous population grows, and I see this happening in my own territory. The residential schools is a terrible mark on Canada's history and something that Indigenous leaders and communities struggle with daily. Children were forcibly removed from their homes and stripped of their language and culture, abused at the hands of their captors. Those children, the ones that survived, grew up and became hurt and lost parents and grandparents, passing on the intergenerational impacts of residential schools. Today, this translates into broken families and broken communities, and in turn, helps the oppressing nation justify and propel stereotypes of Indigenous peoples, effectively dehumanizing us. One result of dehumanization is the treatment of our Indigenous women in Canada. A recent report from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police uncovered the chilling reality that the initial number of 600 Indigenous missing and murdered women has since doubled to be that of 1,200. That's 1,200 Indigenous women who have been missing and murdered in the past 2 decades in Canada. That is 1,200 families, many with children affected by the loss of a loved one. We need to ensure that our Indigenous baby girls born and those that are on their way don't also live this reality. Yet Canada will not agree to an inquiry intended to bring answers and hopefully closure to these children and families. I am here to make the following recommendations: that the UN support an inquiry into the 1,200 missing and murdered Indigenous women, that the United Nations conduct a study on the disparities faced by Indigenous children in Canada with the objective of proposing achievable but ambitious and necessary solutions the state can implement in partnership with Indigenous peoples, and to encourage Canada to fully participate in this study and commission the implementation of forthcoming recommendations. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today, and let us stand together and united for a better future for our children, our youth, our women and nations, and make this next decade a turning point for Indigenous children. If the children flourish, our nations will flourish. Hi, hi, hamitak, yes.
Thank you very much, Vice Chief, for your statement.